Just as we all expected preseason, Dusty May's got the Michigan Wolverines alone atop the Big Ten standings.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Wednesday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shane, joined by our good buddy Leaf Tulane, who's been hosting Locked On College Basketball Saturday game night. That thing is off and running, and we absolutely love it. You're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Reminder, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. We want to give a special shout out to all the everydayers who were with us, and of course, all the great members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord. Leaf, we got a wild Tuesday night of college hoops to unpack. We had 7 ranked teams on the road, kind of a mixed bag of who succeeded and who did not. Liam McNeeley is back in a big way for the UConn Huskies. And my man, it's time to start getting really bubbly. So we got a couple big bubbly games on slate for tonight. But first, Leaf, we got to go to the Big Ten, where somehow as we sit here in mid-February, it is not Purdue. It is not Michigan State. It is not Illinois or Maryland or anyone else atop the Big Ten standings. It is the Michigan Wolverines in the first year of the Dusty May era. I thought they would be better than many imagined preseason, but I didn't think it would be this level of good. And here's why it is that way right now. Going into Tuesday night's action, both Michigan schools and Purdue were tied atop the Big Ten standings, at least in the loss column. And then on Tuesday evening, earlier in the window, Michigan holds on at home to beat the Boilermakers 75-73. Later on in the night, Indiana goes to the Breslin Center and beats Michigan State 71-67 because, of course, Leaf, that's what happened. And so, consequently, we have Michigan all alone. We're going to get into these two games here in just a second. But, Leaf, let's talk about those standings first. Did you see any world, and this is where we'd be sitting here in mid-February?
I'm not flabbergasted, but I'm a little surprised. Like, I didn't think anyone in the Big Ten would be that great coming into the year, because I think losing Zach Edey's monumental. I think Illinois lost Terrence Shannon Jr., and they have a new identity, so I didn't expect consistency. Michigan State honestly surprised me with how well they started, and I think they're regressing to the mean. And then Michigan, I think they're a little better than I thought, and I will say this about Michigan and Wisconsin. I think both those teams are better than I thought, but I don't think they're that great still, despite impressive records, because I don't love the guard play of Michigan. But they found a way to minimize the lack of having a great guard because Danny Wolf's kind of their facilitator.
That's true.
So he's better than I thought he was, and therefore they're better than I thought than I thought they would be. but I think there's a real world where there's a lot of teams that end up like 5-6 losses in the Big Ten, and none of them are all that great. And that's kind of where we're at. They got 6 good teams, but no great teams.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Michigan's schedule. They've still got both games with the Spartans, so we got that home and home ahead of us. And they close hosting Illinois, hosting Maryland, and then at Michigan State. So it's they're done with Purdue. Don't have to play the Boilermakers anymore. I haven't pulled up. Let me look at Purdue's schedule the rest of the way. They host Wisconsin Saturday, then they go to Michigan State, then to Indiana. Do what?
It's a tough schedule. They play 5 ranked teams in a row.
Yeah, and they close at Illinois, man. So it's going to be tough here for Purdue. So Leaf, it wouldn't shock me if when we get to the Big Ten tournament, it's both Michigan schools with a 1 and a 2 next to their name. Do you think that's a plausible reality?
I don't think Michigan State and Michigan can get there because they hurt each other.
That's right.
So if one goes 2-0, then obviously the other one's pushed down. If they go 1-1, it gets difficult because Michigan State plays 5 ranked teams. And so I think it's more likely that Michigan and Purdue are 1 and 2 at this point. I still think Michigan State's got a chance because when you win 9 in a row, you're capable. But I think the scouting report's a little bit out on Michigan State right now. And now they play the best teams. I think what they did, and we talked about this a little bit last week, I believe, where we talked about how taking care of business is really key, and they beat teams they should beat. And now you have to play the teams that you may not have the should next to. Like, you may be favored, but it's not a, hey, they should win this game. And they've lost 3 of those so far.
That's right. Well, let's go to Ann Arbor, where Michigan did beat Purdue 75-73. And this is despite really impressive games from both Braden Smith and TKR Leaf. In your opinion, what allowed Michigan to pull off this win last night?
I think Purdue. I haven't thought about Illinois too, but it's the same thought actually. They have a great guard, and it's Purdue has Braden Smith and Illinois has Kasparas Yakachonis. So in the case of Purdue, they run so much through him that when the defense shifts and says someone else has to beat us, what they did is they would start hedging the ball, forcing the ball out of Braden Smith's hands. Braden Smith makes the right pass into Trey Kaufman-Renn, and then Trey Kaufman-Renn, they'd rush. So they'd bring a player up into where he'd catch it on the short roll, and instead of shooting a little push shot or going into a post move, he was dumping the ball off to first or kicking out to the corners, and the other players weren't good enough.
Yeah.
Caleb First missed multiple layups at the end of the game. He missed free throws. 3 balls from Colvin weren't falling. Heidi missed open ones. So I think the issue for Purdue is they don't have a tertiary, and they have Fletcher Lawyer, so I understand that. But beyond the big 3 guys that have been there for the runs, they don't have someone that can hit shots consistently. And Michigan made a bet saying, you know what, I don't think anyone else is going to beat us, so we're not going to let these guys beat us. And it made Braden Smith's life very difficult. Made the offense slow moving because he had to dribble, then create. They played these defenses, and Purdue didn't have the horses. And they don't have the size they're used to having for getting rebounds themselves on the offense, helping their offense. And it actually killed them defensively because they couldn't finish possessions. And Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden were playing volleyball at the end of the game, just banging it back and forth to each other. And they finished the game off with 3 or 4 offensive rebound putbacks.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is Purdue actually won the rebounding battle in this game. I mean, slightly, but it's just too much of the Twin Towers in this thing. Leaf, to your point, something I wanted to bring up. How about this? Purdue's bench literally 0 for 5 for the game. Only 5 field goal attempts from the bench, but they didn't make any of them. Meanwhile, Michigan's bench pours in 21 points. We had 21-0 in bench scoring between these two teams. A couple nice threes late from Braden Smith to make it look, really close there. But then I thought Michigan did a really good job on Purdue's last possession of turning him, not letting him get a straight line drive to kind of try to get a bucket there to tie this thing up, maybe send it to overtime. And so we'll see what happens going forward here. Leaf, anything else on either of these two teams before we go to East Lansing?
Just that Purdue felt like the better team for the first 30 minutes.
That's a great point.
And that Michigan, I felt like when they were down, I want to say 8, and it was about 58-52. I know it's 6. It started to get to the point of, they were up 8 from 48-40 all the way up to, the 58-54. And it just kept whittling down. But all of a sudden, what you saw is Braden Smith or Trey Kaufman-Renn were scoring. And as soon as they adjusted and said, you guys can't score, I kind of felt that Michigan had the momentum for a while. It just hadn't been a surge. And then this was the move where they could, get into the lane of, we can score. And they're really struggling to score outside of these 2 players. And so they took the ball out of their hands. I felt pretty confident watching the end of the game Michigan was going to win, despite not having a guard. And that I never say that. Like, usually I'll take the team with a guard. And I was watching with some people that said, well, they don't have guards. And I internally, I was thinking to myself, like, but your guard's not going to be able to score. And that was the way I felt going into that game. And I think a lot can be said for a lot of teams, that most teams that win are guards, but Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden give you extra possession, so it's less critical to execute.
And as you look at Michigan scoring down the stretch, there were a couple others mixed in. Donaldson had a bucket, but it was mostly the Wolf and Golden show in terms of scoring for Michigan, final 5.5 of this game or so. Leaf, how about Indiana? I just cannot figure this out. One of the more shocking results of the night. The Hoosiers come into the Breslin Center, knock off the Fightin' Izzos behind 19 from Malik Renew, who is still coming off the bench as he works back in. Leaf, it's almost like the Hoosiers have found some resurrected life post all this Mike Woodson news from last week.
Well, I think they were defending the general. They didn't want Izzo to pass Bob Knight against them.
There you go.
I'm dead serious. I was sitting there with an Indiana grad, one of my best friends, and I told him, I said, if there's ever a game you guys are going to win out of nowhere, it's this one, because as Dickie V calls him, Robert Montgomery Knight, the general.
Right.
He goes into that, and if there was ever a game, Michigan State's vulnerable. Indiana's starting to look like more connected, even though they still don't look very good. And they outplayed the Spartans. The Spartans have had a few injury troubles, like Jeremy Fears was back, but he didn't look like himself. And that team can't shoot. So Indiana employs the zone, and that won them the game.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's crazy what they've started doing. When Malik Renew picked up his fourth foul, and Ballo picked up his fourth foul, and there's still like 8 to go. I was like, oh, they're done. This is over, right? But then they just started just Malik Renew over and over and over with a little bit of Mbako mixed in there, and they were able to get it done. Credit to both these teams. I mean, the last, minute of this game probably took like 30 minutes in real time, because Izzo was just like, we're just going to make it a free throw parade. But both teams hit really well from the free throw line. Here's what I didn't agree with, Leaf, though, down the stretch. Holloman is at the line with about 5 seconds to go. He made the first, misses the second on purpose. I thought they could have gone one more time with fouling and then gone to that. I really wanted them to send Indiana to the line one more time. I thought there was enough time on the clock. Agree or no?
Completely agree. I was so mad about it, because why are you shooting? Firstly, like, you got to make the free throw, but he's a 94% free throw shooter.
Yeah, just hit
so
it.
It's not like it's a risky proposition to begin with. So you make the second, and it's a 1-point game, and you still give yourself a chance that they miss. And even if they make 2, you can shoot a 3, and there's not that much time to foul. And if they do foul, they have to execute it perfectly. So I was so frustrated with it. And then the craziest thing, because it took so long, the game that was taking way longer between UConn and Creighton, they did the exact same thing like 20 seconds later.
Yes.
I couldn't believe it. And I was stunned that 2 great coaches in McDermott and Izzo made clearly the wrong decision without hindsight and at all. Like, everyone knew that was the wrong decision
in real time. Yeah, absolutely. And so really crazy stuff. And to your point earlier, Michigan State has now lost 3 out of 4 after reeling off 13 in a row before that. And so they got to go to Illinois on Saturday. Then they host Purdue next Tuesday, and then they're at Michigan, as you were saying, it's a loaded schedule down the stretch for Michigan State. And so this is the team of these that I think is more likely to fall into that 4, 5, 6 range in the Big Ten standings by the time it's all said and done. All right, Leaf. On Tuesday, we had 7 road teams in action. Obviously, we just talked about Purdue, but we had 6 others that all took place. We're going to get to those results. Most of them were SEC, as is the standard with this conference this year. We'll get to all that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about WayFair. Y'all, look, the holiday hustle, it's been over for a couple months now, but there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that, decluttering, refreshing my space in the new year helps me get back into a routine. And it's like, oh, good, I miss all the holiday decorations, but now we got some new stuff. So whether you're tidying up, you're clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new look to start the new year, WayFair's got everything you need. And by the way, all within your budget. I'm currently looking at some new stuff for our house, and man, WayFair, what I love is they've got a huge selection to make it easy to find pieces that fit my style and budget, and I know they'll fit your style and budget as well. Beyond all that, man, they have free delivery, and it's hassle-free, even on larger items. That is great news, so that you don't have to hey, can I borrow your truck to go find this thing? No. In WayFair's site, it's really easy to navigate, and you can find everything you need in no time. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget at WayFair. So give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head on over to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair. WayFair. Every style, every home. All right, Leaf, in addition to Purdue going on the road and losing, we had 6 other ranked teams on the road, including 5 other top 10 teams. In total, all 7 of these teams were top 13. Auburn goes on the road, wins. Number 2, Alabama wins. Number 3, Florida, tied with Duke, of course, goes on the road, wins shorthanded. We'll get to that in a second. Number 10, Iowa State, nice win. Tennessee goes to Rupp. They were one of the losers on this night. Number 5, Volunteers do that. We already talked Purdue. And then number 13, Arizona goes to those surging K-State Wildcats and falls. Leave, here's where I want to start. Florida at Mississippi State. Yet again, second game in a row without Elijah Martin. Earlier on Tuesday, I kind of thought he would play, but then it came out Tuesday afternoon he wouldn't. And then wouldn't you know it, 30 seconds into this game, down goes Alex Condon with a pretty gnarly looking left ankle kind of thing. Obviously, Micah Handlogton's out. They're missing 3 dudes now that would probably be in the starting lineup. And yet, for the second game in a row, they go on the road. There was no emotional letdown after that win at Auburn on Saturday and knock off Mississippi State 81-68. It didn't always look like it would be this throughout the game. The Bulldogs were hanging on, but my goodness, Florida, Leaf, how about the Gators?
See, I actually thought they'd win this game, even though they came in as a 1.5-point favorite, and then all of a sudden by tip-off, they were 2.5-point dogs. And then 30 seconds in, arguably their most valuable player. I know Walter Clayton Jr. is going to get the nod and potentially an All-American. I believe he should be. But I think Alex Condon might be their most valuable player. And all of a sudden, he goes down in the heap, and you're like, man, oh, that's tough. Like, I don't know how I feel about that. But I really felt confident. And then they were able to hang around. They didn't look good. Open up a 17-0 run to start the second half. And they weren't just like, hey, we're grinding you out, like we're scoring, you're not. No, they were getting dominant stops, running in transition, dunks, 3 balls in transition. And you were like, okay, like this team can really go. We knew that. But this team's really going without critical players in their backcourt and their front court. Shout out Tommy Hawk, by the way. And
yeah, thank you.
For those of you, and you know, this may sound like a victory lap, but I want this one. This is a good one. I tweeted last year about how Florida was like the most underrated team in the country, like probably around this time last year in bracketology, they were in 11. And I said, in what world? And I'm from Utah, Jazz shirt on right now. I'm from Utah. And I was on a Jazz a radio station that covers the Utes. And I said, in what world is Utah an 8 seed and Florida an 11? Like, look, they got a guy in Tommy Hawk and Alex Condon, who Utah really tried to get, that are way better than Utah's bigs aside from Carlson. And even then, they can play toe-to-toe with Carlson. Their backcourt's 20 times better. Like, that was my whole argument. So Florida ends up being a 7 seed and probably should have been a 6 because they went so far in the SEC tournament. And I said, Tommy Hawk, I tweeted this, Tommy Hawk is the best player that no one in the country knows about. And Florida should be all this. Well, he had 16, 9, and 8, and he came off the bench. And yeah, he played 36 minutes because his best pal, Condon, goes down. Well, last game, he was unbelievable. He had 16 and 9 against Auburn, and he and Alex Condon outplayed Janai Broome. And it wasn't close. Broome was schooled. So Florida's front court is as good as their backcourt, and their backcourt's one of the best in the country, but no one talks about the front court. So shout out Tommy Hawk and Alex Condon.
And Hawk had 2 blocks and 2 steals to go with it. I mean, this was crazy stat stuffing game. And then, of course, it's Denzel Aberdeen that actually leads the way in scoring for the Gators with 20. Leaf, let's go to Rupp Arena, where Tennessee was heading in, the number 5 Vols, the number 15 Kentucky, looking to get some payback because Kentucky had come in just a couple weeks ago and knocked off the Vols in Knoxville. But Kentucky down Jackson Robinson, which I thought was going to be the nail in the coffin even ahead of this game, down Lamont Butler, who played, 22 minutes or so, but went out again. And Kentucky sweeps the regular season series with Tennessee, knocking off the Vols 75-64. Leaf, I'm kind of to the point we had talked about, I think it was you and I, like, who is the dude for Kentucky, right? Like, they just don't have a Rob Dillingham or, something like that they can just turn to. Otega Owe has double-digit points in every game this season. I know it's not like he's, like, overwhelming you with, like, 25 a game, but is that consistency he's bringing, does that make him the man for Kentucky?
I think he's the best isolation, go and get it type of guy, but I don't think he's the guy that on the top of the scouting report says, like, guard him this way. I think you really want to run Brea Robinson off the line. And if I were playing Kentucky, I would pressure the heck out of Amari Williams because he's the guy who runs it. Because if they run an offense that has all these split cuts and one guy goes to the 3, one goes to the baseline, and he's the guy, he's the head of the snake. But here's the thing about Tennessee, and I think we did an episode after the first time these two played. And my point was, if you can score points, and just in general, like if you're a really good offense, if you can score points, then Tennessee is going to struggle against you because your natural scoring ability doesn't go away against Tennessee's defense. Like, yes, they can minimize you, but they have to match your scoring, which is harder to do than you trying to just, bump and back down with the physicality they established, because you have to call it both ways. So both times these two teams have played, the first line was 10-point advantage for Tennessee at Tennessee, and this one favored Tennessee by 2.5 at Rupp, despite Kentucky going into Tennessee winning. So both times I bet on Kentucky, and both times I use the same logic. Look, you can score points. I don't know if Tennessee can. Like, Igor Milicic had one of the most efficient and rare stat lines recently, and still Tennessee didn't score that many points. You had Zakai Ziegler out, and they stepped up and scored even more. Ziegler's back. You think they're better, but still they blast Oklahoma and don't score that many points. And I know that's partly because their defense is great, but Kentucky's an unbelievable offense. I'm not worried about their defense getting exposed. The teams that kill Kentucky are the teams that can spread you out and score, not slow down the game and say, yeah, we're going to try to out-execute you. Like, you're not out-executing Mark Pope. So Tennessee, I think, is vulnerable. I've said this many, many times. Even when they're number one in the country, I don't think they're that good. And Kentucky, they're terrible on defense, but boy, are they great on offense.
That's right. I think that's absolutely the blueprint for what you got to do against both of these teams, right, in order to beat them. Tough night for Chaz Lanier, shooting 3 of 13 from the field, 0 of 7 from beyond the arc. Leaf, that is not going to get it done. The rest of these ranked teams on the road, Auburn, Vandy held tough for a while there in Nashville. Auburn kind of sees things through. Alabama, 103-80 in Austin over Texas. Per Jared Burson, they're the only Division I team to score 100 points on 60, 55, 90 shooting, meaning field goals, threes, and free throws in a road win over the last 15 seasons. Leaf. Iowa State goes to UCF and wins, but the game I want to talk about to close out this segment, number 13, Arizona, been playing really, really well on the road at Kansas State, and a game where the Wildcats are guaranteed to win, and they do, 73-70. Kansas State, Leaf, had gone on a 6-game losing streak. They've chased that now with a 6-game winning streak. I said yesterday afternoon this was a trap game for Arizona ahead of a matchup with Houston this weekend, and indeed it was. Is there something real going on with Kansas State right now? What are your thoughts?
It's Kansas State, since I'm trying to find the stat here, but I don't have. But I think they're on a 6-game winning streak. They might be 7. In that streak, they're top 18 in KenPom. So they've been really, really good and beating good teams because they found a way to play alongside Doug McDaniel and through Coleman Hawkins. Coleman Hawkins doesn't have to be your leading scorer, but he does have to be your most impactful player. Distribute the ball, defend, take away your wings, switch on defense. And early in the year, he was trying to score, and Doug McDaniel was trying to score, and there was no chemistry, no cohesion. I don't think this team's great, but what they have is they have a belief system right now that allows them to say, you know what, Hazen's just going to shoot. Coleman Hawkins is going to distribute and be happy with the ball in his hands. Doug McDaniel gets to do what he does best and score, not be a point guard. And then you've got Gasson and all these guys who are role players that have been trying to take starring roles. So I do think they have something real. I don't think they're Elite 8 good like they were with the similar format of going far and playing with the diminutive point guard and an aggressive 3 or 4 and Hawkins compared to Johnson. But I also think a couple of the teams they've played that have made them look good are bad at shooting. So Kansas can't shoot the ball. And so when you double, you're like, whatever, like double and for what cost? They're going to miss. I mean, Arizona went 1 of 18 to start the game. So did Kansas State, actually. That's crazy fact for you. They both started 1 of 18 from 3. But, they can't shoot. So I think some of the defensive schemes that are a little gimmicky that Kansas State's employing, the good teams they've beaten, and Iowa State had a horrible shooting day. They can shoot, but they had a horrible shooting day. So they've beaten the 3 best teams in that process, can't shoot the ball in the days they've played them. And I don't think it's necessarily their defense has been lights out. It's been fortuitous. But you know what? Like, they're pushing. Maybe they're on a bubble. I think they probably are.
Man, that would be crazy. And yeah, I mean, because it's the Big 12. If you keep winning games, why not? Right? It could be a very real thing. To Leaf's point, this game set college basketball back 4 decades. The teams combined to go 3 of 41 from deep. That's 7.3%, Leaf. Absolutely atrocious. Still no Trey Townsend for Arizona. I think that is a critical point that we have to make about this game. Season high for Doug McDaniel with 24. Leaf, so we'll keep our eyes on both these teams. I'm very excited. This weekend we both get Arizona and Houston and Auburn and Alabama. It's going to be a loaded weekend with a bunch of other games as well. All right, Leaf. Somebody who did shoot very well on Tuesday night was Mr. Liam McNeeley, who was back in the starting lineup for the first time for UConn. 38 to help UConn win for the first ever time in Omaha against Creighton. We'll get to that and get you set for Wednesday night's bubbly slate, all coming up in just a second. UConn heads into Creighton. UConn had just taken that loss to St. John's over the weekend. We've had all four of the Big East top four all in action against each other recently, in addition to this game, also with St. John's and with Marquette. Marquette finally got off the schneid, by the way, on Tuesday night. It was against DePaul, but whatever, they're back in the win.
And they still didn't look good.
Anyway, UConn goes to number 24, Creighton. Creighton's been on a roll lately. I think it was a 9-game winning streak coming in. UConn has literally never won in Omaha, Nebraska against the Blue Jays until last night. Liam McNeeley, Leaf, 38 points, 12 of 22 from the field, 5 of 10 of 3, 9 of 10 at the free throw line, and 0 chips and 10 rebounds to boot. This was his second game back, but it was his first game back in the starting rotation. And I think you had said at some point, he's not a savior for UConn. I think that was you that said that, but boy, does he change where things are at.
I don't know if I said savior, but I've been saying he's their best player for a while.
Yes.
And so I said he's their best player. What he changes is that he can create offense, and they have this beautiful flowing offense. But if a team can bust up the sets, you still need someone to break down. In previous years, they've had plenty of guys who can do it, namely first-team All-American Tristan Newton, Stephon Castle, who's probably going to be the Rookie of the Year. You've got a bunch of these guys, and this year they don't have them. So, you'd think Karaban's the best player because he's the returning. But Karaban on both the championships teams was either the fourth or fifth option on offense. A great fourth or fifth option, a really good second or third option, but he's not a first option. Solo ball is a guy who flies off screens. Well, McNeeley, probably best as a catch-and-shoot guy, but he can break down. He can be a secondary facilitator. Makes the life so much easier for the guards of Diarra, Mahaney, these guys. And this was his, hey, I'm back and I'm him. He had a performance that only Kevin Durant and, I forget who the other one, but it's Steph. It was Steph. There's only been 2 players in high major basketball that have played 30 and 10 games as a freshman. And Durant did it 3 times, Steph once. And it's absurd. He's a rebounder. He's a winner. I actually have been talking in the draft world about how he should be a lottery guy because he does the winning things, and on a team that was expected to be great. The only reason that they're in that conversation, when they're fully right, it's him. When he came back after Maui and decided, you know what, I am that good, they won 7 straight. He goes out, they lose a couple. I know he played against St. John's, but he was 4 of 15, but yet he was their best player in that game, if you ask me. He had 18 against St. John's' vaunted defense. He was the most able to break down that defense. And then he goes and plays Creighton's drop coverage. That is really giving UConn fits, as you said. They play this drop coverage, and it means that they can't do the same things they like to do because Kalkbrenner influences the paint and they can cover the 3. Well, it doesn't matter against McNeeley because he's adept at scoring at every inch of the court. So McNeely's a stud, and when he's right, UConn's a really difficult team. When he's not, I don't think they're that great.
Yep. And I think ultimately that's why they're going to be strong and solid, but for me is not a national championship contender as they've been the last 2 years. I just don't think there's enough in addition to him. Plus there's the whole freshman of it. He's a high level player, but it's just not enough to have to rely on him to be the dude when we get to March. Leaf, part of the problem to that point, outside of Liam McNeeley, the rest of UConn was 14 of 44 from the field, 31.8%, and just 6.3% from 3. Got to have other guys step up. Just 4 bench points, so slightly better than what we talked about with Purdue's 0 for there, but whatever. Something to note, by the way, Hassan Diarra did not start this game. He's been struggling with tendonitis in his knee. Coach Hurley said he was about 70%. Only ended up playing about 7 minutes in this game, so that's just something to track going forward for UConn. And Leaf, to your point earlier, just coming back around, I thought they mishandled their end of game free throw scenarios, just like Michigan State. I don't expect them to do that regularly, but what I want to get to is consequently now, because of this result, St. John's has a 2-game cushion in the Big East standings The number 9 Johnnies are 12-1. Creighton, number 24, falls to 11-3. Marquette, 10-4, and then UConn tied with Marquette in the loss column, but a game back in the win column at 9-4. And speaking of that, we do have a road game tonight for St. John's at Villanova, 6 p.m. on FS1. Johnny's -2.5. Leaf, you think that Nova's got any problems they can cause with Eric Dixon and company, or does St. John's roll in and just keep things going?
I think the Johnnies win. I don't know if I'll play that one. My logic of why that Nova would be able to neutralize it is they don't play at a pace that gets sped up too fast. So maybe the Johnnies will have trouble, instigating that turnover chaos that they do. But I think they'll have it planned, like saying, "Hey, Eric Dixon, it's just you," or they're going to try to take away Dixon and say someone else beat us. One of the two. So I trust Patino to outcoach Neptune, run circles around him, and I think the Johnnies win that one. So I've talked myself into it. I might bet
it. Perfect. Hey, a couple other notable results I just wanted to mention. Illinois wins hosting UCLA last night, 83-78. And in Mountain West action, Utah State knocks off Colorado State, 93-85. Just an important matchup atop Mountain West standings. And then San Diego State comes back from a big hole to knock off San Jose State, 69-66. That's a big bubble result. San Diego State firmly on the bubble right now. Speaking of, Leaf, 4 bubbly games I want to mention ahead of tonight, because we're to that point of the season where these are the games that we're really keeping tabs on. So I want to tell you these 4 games, folks, and who you should be rooting for if you're a bubble team. We've got Oklahoma at number 21, Mizzou, 9 p.m. on SEC Network. FanDuel's got it, Mizzou -8.5. It's Oklahoma on the bubble. So if you're a bubble team, you're a big Tigers fan tonight. Arkansas hosting LSU, 9 p.m. on ESPN2. FanDuel has it Razorbacks -9.5. You really want LSU to be a road winner tonight if you're a bubble team. Arkansas starting to make some moves. Are they figuring things out? VCU at George Washington, 7 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. FanDuel's got it VCU -8.5. You're a big George Washington fan if you're a bubble team. And then X at Providence, 8 p.m. on Peacock. Xavier -2.5. And Xavier's the bubble team, so you're a Providence fan. Leaf, of that quartet of games, any of those really interest you?
I think the Providence, they might win that game. Providence is really difficult to play at. So I would probably say Providence the most likely to spoil the party. I also think that Oklahoma is going to have a really tough time earning their way to the right side of the bubble because they just play so many good teams. Like, yes, they beat Michigan. And so Michigan doing well is really nice. And they had a great start to the season. But every good team they've played in SEC play, they've lost. Yeah. And that's not going to get you in. I don't think they have the know-how or the ability to get in unless they somehow beat an Alabama and Auburn and Florida. And I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. I mean, that's SEC life right now, right? Where, like, I know it's tough, but at some point the losses pile up and they matter. All right, folks, great show. Always good to chat with Leaf here on Wednesday. Folks, make sure you're tuned in Saturday night. Going to be a crazy slate yet again of Saturday night hoops, and Leaf will be hosting that and taking you home and making sure you know everything that happened on Saturday's great slate. If you've not subscribed to the show on video and audio, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss a single second of Locked On College Basketball. If you've not joined our Locked On College Basketball Discord, where we're talking about all these games all the time in real time, man, join us. That link is in the show notes, and it's absolutely free to join. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family, although Fletcher had a nice little night last night for Purdue in the loss. Let's go Wild Popes. Shouts to our guy Mick Bruins. Man, most of the Wild Popes won last night, but the Mick Bruins did not. So, 2 of 3 losses in our shout sleeve. That's painful. We'll talk to you again tomorrow to unpack Wednesday's slate. But until then, peace.